Welcome to Health Hacktivators with lifestyle medicine doctor, GP and longevity expert Dr. Alka Patel. This show will help you to discover a hidden health hacking code that unlocks your phenomenal potential for an outstanding health span, lifespan and wealth span. The show features candid conversations with celebrities, influencers and industry icons, real life stories and cutting-edge health activating advice that other doctors might not tell you. Discover why now is the time to join the strategic self-care revolution and experience the profound effect this will have on your personal and professional success. Now, here is your host, Dr. Alka Patel.
Hi, hey, and hello, Health Hacktivators. For today's show, I am joined by Nick Feeney, the life coach who helps men with a midlife reset so they can avoid a midlife crisis. Now, Nick has been married since 2017 to the very beautiful Andrea McLean, who we know as one of the former anchor women on Loose Women, of course. And now together, they have founded This Girl, This Guy, which we will be hearing more about on this show. Today, we are talking connection and loneliness. Before we get into today's conversation, please do support today's show's sponsor, Youth and Earth. Youth and Earth have a range of products that I love to use myself to supercharge my metabolism, to support my health, and to slow down cellular aging. So just be sure you click the link in the show notes for exclusive offers, which Youth and Earth are so generously giving only for listeners of this show. We are live. Amazing. Great. Well, hello, Nick. It is wonderful to have you here.
Alka, thank you so much for inviting me along to your podcast. I'm super excited to have this conversation. I know it's going to be great.
For sure. It's going to be a really exciting conversation. I know that. So look, this is what I want to kick off with. We can see in your background, this girl is on fire. But for you, your hashtag is This Guy is on Fire, isn't it? But what I really want to catch on is really, I guess it would be fair to say that you haven't always been this guy on fire. I wonder if the opposite has been true, right? You've been this guy that's burning out. I know you've gone from six figures to losing your business to being diagnosed with heart problems and then hitting what I tend to call this dreaded 3D brick wall. So this 3D brick wall of drink, of drugs and of divorce. So if I may, Nick, I would like to take you back there, if that's okay, to that time for you of drink and drugs and divorce, if that's all right. Because what I really want to zone in on is really probably underlying all of it is this fourth D, that fourth D of disconnection. And I know you've talked about this before, loneliness. So let's go back there. You're lonely even though you're in a relationship. Tell us about that, Nick.
Well, firstly, this is actually my wife's office I'm in. That's why it said This Girl is on Fire. The This Guy is on Fire office is in the other room, but I'm actually using her computer today. But yeah, loneliness in a relationship, all those things that you said were about 10, 11 years ago in my life. And disconnected, most definitely disconnected with myself, with my life, with my then marriage. And that loneliness is probably the most awful feeling I've ever had, where you're in a relationship, and that particular relationship was 23 and a bit years, and I never felt so lonely, even laying in the bed next to my first wife. And it's because we are completely disconnected. We'd had conversations, we tried sorting some things out, but it's really fascinating when you get to that point that you think you're saying something and they hear something completely different. But actually you're both right and you're both wrong, because neither of you are listening correctly. Neither of you are being able to converse in a way that isn't sort of vilifying the other person or because everything is just not right at that moment in your life. And for me, when I got to that point, of all those other things that you talked about. I mean, I can go into those things, the drinking, the drugs, were a way of me masking my unhappiness. And most of this, by
Yeah.
the way, is when you're in it, you don't realize it. You're just doing it. You think
So
you're
true.
coping. Everything's okay. You think, and you just keep pushing through, and you just drink more and take more drugs and carry on down that slippery path. Um, but I think for me, when the disconnect became so disconnected, and I started to show traits
Mm.
of someone who I definitely never wanted to be, and which therefore made me incredibly unhappy with who I was. Thankfully, I realised there was no amount of drink or drugs, or disowning any of my sort of issues that were going on, led to anything good. So I knew I had to make some decisions to change. And as you said, I wasn't always, as we say, this guy's on fire. I was burning out, and
Yeah.
I think there's always that one thing that you remember that made you go, right, I'm changing. This needs to change. And
Mm.
it's never just that one thing. It's a combination of all those other things, but it's a one thing that pushes you over the that edge, isn't it? And for me, that was actually um, shouting at my children and for simple
Mm.
things. And then my then wife and myself, we would start each day so stressed that it wouldn't take much
Yeah.
for us to, go into an explosive row. And on one particular time,
Mm.
myself and my
Mm.
wife are physically grabbing each other, and it's like, no, this is just not what I'm meant to be. And there's my two beautiful girls looking at us, trying to break us apart, and that was just right. Whatever it takes, it's
Mm.
got to change.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, thank you, Nick, for just being so open in your share of that and going back to those 10, 12, 13 years ago, because life takes you on a journey, doesn't it? But if we just stick to that connection piece for a minute, you mentioned your beautiful children as well. And this all goes back to childhood, doesn't it? Those first cries of the baby, and there's a way of connecting. The mother responds, the father responds. The baby recognizes that if they call out, then their needs are going to be met. And then this follows us into adulthood as well. That as a babies, we learn that we're going to be heard and we're going to be seen and we're going to be loved if there's someone who comes when we need them. And then as we turn into adults, we've got to keep tuning in to exactly those signals from each other, that kind of sense of I'm important enough for you to notice me. I'm important enough for you to care for me, to be safe with you, to be secure for you. And when that changes, that intuition, that sense of exactly as you said, who you are, what you mean to each other, just turns topsy-turvy. And from what you're saying, that first step was awareness for you, wasn't it? Just noticing that this is how I'm showing up and I don't want this.
Yeah, well, what you describe, you would think would be a very natural progression for most people, but it isn't, is it? And there's lots of parents
No.
that are just slightly older version of the children themselves, and there is a lot of immaturity in those young relationships. I think I
Mm.
was very lucky that although my childhood, there were times that we didn't have lots of money. There were lots of us as well. I'm one of eight, and we were a blended
Wow.
family. Um, there was a lot of love in the house, and whilst there wasn't a huge amount of tactile love. I cannot remember my mum cuddling me,
Mm.
for example. And that led to me having my own sort of issues of looking for love. But one thing I was absolutely certain
Mm.
is that when my children come along, they will know what love is. They will feel love. And so I was always a hands-on dad. I love being a dad. I love now being a dad. You know, my daughters, got two beautiful girls, and I've got a beautiful stepdaughter, like 16, 17, 20, and a stepson who's 21. I love my relationship with them. I love watching them grow up and mature, and the conversations and the experiences that we have. And back then, I always wanted to be a great dad. And I think the biggest wrench for me was in my head. I always had this image of the happy ever after. Me, their mum, them two. We get old, they get older, they have children, all that. And it was when that was sort of becoming very clear that that was not going to happen, that I knew that, again, like I say, I had to make changes. And knowing that I wouldn't see them every morning for breakfast was awful. But I knew they were not getting the dad I was capable of being. And that's what drove me to make a short-term tough decision for the long-term benefit of all of us.
Yeah. So what do you say to your children? What do you teach your children when it comes to conversations about connection and disconnection? And more specifically, what you're raising, which is really about loneliness, isn't it? It's that feeling of being alone. You describe lying in your bed next to your partner, but still feeling alone. You can be at a party surrounded by people and still feel very, very alone. So what conversation do you have? Because there is a distinction, isn't there, Nick, between loneliness, which is feeling alone despite social contact. There's social isolation, which we've all been through, and we've been connected through that, through COVID, which is that lack of social connection. But there's also solitude, where you can feel the comfort of being alone. So what do you teach your children?
The conversations we have is actually more around the solitude, is you need to be comfortable in your own company. And you really need to get to know who you are. We watch a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race, and he has this saying at the end, whereas if you can't love yourself, who else is going to love you? And so we're very lucky. I'm a accredited life coach and a mentor. So's my wife. That is what our business is about. We coach hundreds and hundreds of men and women. And what's great is through those conversations, we have those conversations with our children, and it's that importance of owning your own power on all these things about happiness, loneliness, getting comfortable with that. If you have a boyfriend, you want them, you don't need them. And one of the things that I learned, it was 2007, and it was one of my coaches back then said to me, and it was about my then wife. He said, I know you want your wife to be happy, but it's not your job to make her happy. That's something she has to do herself. And through that conversation, it spurred on loads of other little conversations. And to this day, I had a conversation recently with a coaching client where he said, I tell my daughter my job is to make you happy and blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, well, that's great. You want her to be happy. I said, you're taking away her power to make herself happy. Yeah. And I know you want to do stuff that makes her happy, and that's great, but do not take away her power. And he's, oh my God, I never thought about it like that. And it's because of these things that we've been through. Same with loneliness, like I say, is making sure that they take the power that they have to go, I choose to be alone. I choose to find myself. I choose to go on holiday by myself, or go on this journey by myself, so that when I come back, I can enjoy you even more. Or I can enjoy my life even more. And this is what we teach them.
Yeah. And I love that. It is back to responsibility, and where does that sit? And as much as we wish we had the power to make people do what we want them to do and be who we are and be just like us, we absolutely don't have that. But the power is here, isn't it? For everything that you take responsibility for yourself. And really important in that conversation about solitude and doing things for yourself, because there's a lot of data now, Nick, around the health impact of social isolation and disconnect as well. And we're talking about the hardcore physical illnesses as well. There's a 29% increased risk of heart disease if you feel socially alone, and a 32% increased risk of stroke. Now, these are not small numbers. These are big numbers. Your rates of depression, anxiety, suicide are much higher if you're feeling lonely and socially disconnected. But there's a big flip side to that, is people who value themselves, who feel as connect to themselves, have got much higher rates of happiness, fulfillment, much lower rates of illness and disease, both kind of physical and emotional as well, because there's a real connect. There's a part of your brain that's the same part, in fact, that lights up when you suffer with physical pain, but that lights up when you suffer with social pain, that social isolation. So it's so important. I love that what you're teaching and what you're representing about that sense that solitude is different, this understanding of yourself, because this is really critical to your work with men as well, isn't it? So maybe let's talk a little bit about the male-female difference a little bit. I know you're sitting pretty in pink in the background there with this girl is on fire, but what's been your experience with coaching men who have a very different way of communicating in some situations, don't they? So tell me about your experience with that.
Do you know what's fascinating is ultimately we're all human beings, and once we get past, so with the coaching we do with women, we can do one-to-many, because as you know, women will quite happily have a conversation in a small group, in a big group, and share what they're feeling, thinking, and all that. So that's great. Men, not so much. So I do a lot more one-to-one coaching with men. But what I'm finding is that when men make that decision that they're going to fix themselves or fix a problem, as they call it, and we know that it's not fixing, but this is how they come into my world. They really buy into it, and it's. I was saying to someone today, actually, when men don't talk, the moment they cross that threshold and start talking, you can't shut them up, and it's almost like a weight is lifted off them, because they realise all this ego that's been stopping them from admitting how they think or feel, or how life is out of control, or they don't quite know what they're doing. The moment they start talking about that, they realize that all those things that judging or what they thought might happen or something didn't happen, and it's okay. And then they just start going, well, there's this, and I want to really just encourage more and more men to just be curious about, what if I did actually pull down this mask that I'm wearing and let someone know that I'm not quite sure of myself, or I'm not quite sure of what's going on, or I've got a question. And I don't know if when you were at school, our teacher would say the most stupid question is the one you don't ask. And that's
Yeah, I think the teachers still say that. Nothing's changed.
yeah. And but it resonates with me, because actually just asking that question, but more importantly, speaking to someone. Your friends, unfortunately, aren't always the best, especially in male groups. There's a lot more banter, because while you may be curious and happy to start talking about something that's not quite working for you, the person receiving it may not be ready to have that conversation, or even know what to do with what you're asking. So this is why I think the work that I do in the community of men that I help, I'm really enjoying it. And one of the things that is going to happen a lot more next year is I'm working with corporations a lot, so I can have this conversation with many men in their corporate environment, rather than just waiting for one man to come to me, then another man, because this is the problem. It's only me and my time, and there's only so many hours in the day. So it's finding ways that I can say what I say to my individual clients to many more people, and get them curious and open-minded and up for letting go.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, you've reminded me actually of a patient that I once saw. Man in a suit, hardly ever came to see me as his doctor. Pitches up one day out of the blue, sits down and says, "I've got a sore throat." And obviously checked him out. Nothing too dramatic going on there, but I just knew instinctively he hadn't come about his sore throat. Now, I'm sure you've been to your GP. There's kind of 10 minutes on the clock, and it's see you later. But I just couldn't do this here, and I was really open with him, and I said, "You haven't come about your sore throat. Tell me what it is." And exactly what you've just said outpoured all of this sense of me, the man, I'm going to work, I'm earning for my family, I've got to keep the roof over my head, my daughter is very, very unwell, and I want to be with her, and yet I've got to go out and fulfill this role as the husband and as the father figure and as the breadwinner, and it all came pouring out. But until someone asked him the question, tell me what's really going on, he would have held that. And sometimes that's what it takes. It just takes someone to ask the question, but more importantly, please wait for the answer, because we often say to people, "Hey, how you doing? How's everything okay? How are you?" You don't even hear the fine before you've gone on to the next question or walked away, but you have to stop and you have to pause and you have to wait for the response. And some of that is about also showing some of your own vulnerability in that conversation as well, isn't it?
Well, I think this is what I love about the fact that I'm a coach and a mentor, because the way I see coaching is all my clients, they have the answers inside them. So I just get them asking themselves better questions. Okay. But with the mentoring side, I can use the experiences that I've had and the people that I've worked with. And I do get to work with some incredible industry leaders, and my job every day is to learn more and just keep paying it forward. So I love that about what we do. And it's just sometimes just being aware that when you do this, is they just want to sometimes have you listen, not necessarily give an opinion or try and sort it out for them. And what I find when I have these conversations with when people come and see me, it's like that first 10 minutes in the your surgery. They dance around. How's your week? Oh, and talk about this, and you go, right. So tell me what's really going on. And it's those final couple of minutes that they then go and start blurting everything out. And then you start working out, okay, is this a rant? Is this something? And I say to them, do you want me to listen or do you want me to help? And they go, I just want you to listen this time, because they just need to get it off. They just need to get it out there. Yeah. And sometimes just by saying it helps them hear it differently rather than how they hear it in here. But no, I just find that coaching and mentoring fascinating. And like I said, how men, like in your surgery, we're good at pretending everything's great over here, and then you just ask them that one more time, or that tell me what's really going on, and then they're just like
yeah. But there is a bit of a disconnect here, isn't there, Nick, as well? And maybe this is something to debate, but women having conversations with women, men having conversations with men. You've got, this girl is on fire, this guy is on fire. And yet if we don't hear each other's conversations, going back right at the beginning of what we're talking about, we're never going to solve the disconnection in relationships, in partnerships, in couples, are we? So where's the space for the listening to understand that happens cross-gender rather than the isolation? And I completely understand why we do the separation and why that also fulfills a need of being able to be more open. But there's also a harm there, isn't there?
Well, I think if you, and by the way, great question. I think that if you have this absolute separation and disconnect, as you call it, then that is very harmful. But one of the things that we do in our coaching, so for example, I will coach the men. My coaching is all based around midlife, okay, and the issues that men have, the struggles that they go through, and a large part of that is understanding their wife and menopause. and what their wife is going through. So by having a conversation with a man about what their wife is going through, so they understand, so they're not just saying silly stuff like, oh my gosh, she's crazy, I don't know what's going on. Actually empathizing and understanding and trying to learn more about what's going on so they can support them better. That's something that we've been doing for a while. But next year, and we've already got a few things lined up, we're actually taking this guy on the road, and we're doing some events where it is for male and female. So for the first time, our female members can bring their partners, their male partners, their male colleagues, their brothers with them. So actually you can hear both sides of the story, because like you were saying, this disconnect, if we're looking after one here and one here, but they're not speaking to each other and sharing and empathizing with each other as to what's going on, you are going to have an even bigger disconnect than what we have at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's music to my ears that you're doing that, because that was probably exactly where I was trying to go with this, is that, if we've got to also bring us all together as well, which is so important. So I'm looking forward to that road show. Is it you and Andrea, both of you, is it?
So yeah, there's actually a couple of things that we've got lined up. We're launching we're launching a show on YouTube, and that should be in the spring. You're the first hearing about this, by the way. So it's like outside of our team, no one knows this, so that's happening in spring, and then we will take that show on the road, and we'll go to a few venues around the UK, and then there is also very, very, very near to signing on a book. Talking about exactly this. So yeah, it's important. It's incredibly important.
I
And
love
we
that.
keep going.
Yeah. Oh, it totally is. So that has got me even more excited for your work, Nick, as well. You heard it here first, everybody.
That is true.
There's a book and a roadshow and a YouTube channel. So we'll definitely put all of that information into the show notes for everyone as well, Nick, because this is all hugely important, isn't it? And I love that kind of focus on midlife as well. But let me ask you a question then. What is midlife? I want a number, right? When we talk about midlife, what number in terms of age are you talking about?
Okay. I'm going to give you a number, but I don't see midlife as a number. So when it happened for me, it was 39. But
Okay.
I've just coached a 29-year-old who's gone through his own crisis, as we call it, and he goes, I'm not in midlife, but oh my God, I need your help. I think the thing is, midlife, if we look at how statistically we're gonna, men in the UK live to the age of 80, so midlife is 40. But I think the thing with men is they spend a little bit longer holding on to that inner child that they still are, and therefore it just varies with men depending on what happens in life, what is happening to them right now. If everything's going great, they don't see midlife happening till God knows when. I had a 56-year-old guy come up to me and he said, oh my God, I think I'm having a midlife crisis, but I'm a bit late to the party. And these were his words. And I'm like, I said, well, tell me what's happened and why you're saying that. And it's because that midlife crisis tends to be something impactful that happens. Certainly for men, where they might lose someone of similar age, they might lose something that they've been doing a while. It might be a job change, it might be something huge to do with their identity, and they start feeling lost or alone, as we spoken about earlier. And it's those moments that they start then second guessing. And going back to if it's they've lost someone, as in that person that they knew has died, they then start taking life a little bit seriously and realizing that life is actually finite, not one big party, and they can do anything to their body or to themselves and they'll be fine. And they start asking themselves different questions. So that to me is midlife. But for me, that happened at 39.
Okay, so two really, really interesting things that you said there. So, where can I start? Right, I'm going to start with the number. So, you may or may not know, but on this show, my mission is to help 1 million people live their potential for a 1 million hour life. So I know a lot of people get their calculators out at this point. That is 116 years. And I absolutely believe that we are able to do that right here, right now, because of everything that we have in our fingertips and everything people are going to be hearing about and have already heard about on this show, which then makes the number, the midway of that, 58. So your little client was onto something there. So that's where I want to kind of set a number. But really interestingly, I don't know if you realize you did this, but the moment I asked you about midlife, you associated that with midlife crisis, and you gave me the number that the crisis happens. So why that association? That's what we need to unplug, that midlife isn't about the crisis. Because the moment we keep that association, we keep playing into that, right? But it's really, really interesting that you did that. So now I've called you out on doing that. Tell me what was going on in your mind when you even said that.
Well, I think it goes back to what my statement that I was saying earlier. I mean, firstly, sign me up to your million club, because I'm up for that. 116 years sounds awesome. But here's the thing, certainly speaking from my own experience, age has never bothered me as a number. So I turned 50 this year, and some people are like, oh, you get all the jokes and bits and pieces. And it is a measure of time. It has never bothered me. When I turned 30, 40, 50, it never bothered me. But I never looked at myself in an aging process until my life had its car crash moment. I lost my business, I lost my health, I lost my marriage and everything. And that's when I started looking at midlife, my life, in the middle of my life. And that's why I associate it with crisis. Now, my goal is I work with clients whose lives are actually great, and I want their life to be even greater. So I do it from a position of strength. One of the things that I talk about a lot, so myself and Andrea, we go and see a marriage counselor, but our marriage is amazing, but we do it from a position of strength. And this is one thing that we're trying to get across in our messaging to people, is the whole point of this Guys on Fire is I want to save you the years I went through by not recognizing the signs or the things that I had to change that were not working for me in that part of my life. And if you can do that before they start costing you, whether that's physically, emotionally, mentally, financially, whatever that cost is, then I know that I've done a great job. Because like I said, I ignored every sign, and I knew things weren't right, but I didn't know what to do about it. And then all of a sudden it came crashing down. So if I can save people all that pain, all that, I mean, I was depressed for 4 years after everything. And it was a very, very difficult time in my life. But I always knew that I had to get help. Once I crashed, I went to see this amazing therapist and coach, and I saw her for 2.5 years, every week for 2.5 years. Best investment I ever made. And I had loads of things going on, and she said to me, how are you coping with everything that you've got going on? Because you have got a lot going on. Some people come to me with just one of these things. How are you coping? It's because I knew my now wasn't forever. And I knew with her guidance and with the tools she could give me, I could get through this. And as difficult it felt at that time, as much as it hurt at the time, I just knew that there'd be better days ahead of me, basically. And I made a promise to myself that the day I moved out of my marital home, to be a better person and to do whatever it took to be a better person. So taking what you said, if I can show people how to be better even if things are good already, how amazing would that be? So actually, midlife just becomes
Totally.
a wonderful time of their life where they made a few changes and really embraced it, really enjoyed it, stopped looking back and trying to be that 20-year-old. Oh, I haven't got the body of the 20-year-old. I don't do that anymore. Well, that's because you're not that person anymore. Be who you are right now and grow into who you're going to be. And that's how I want to change that. So ask me that in a few years' time, and I might give you a very different answer because I'm finally getting it across.
Yeah, yeah, and I will ask you that in a few years' time because the conversation changes, doesn't it? These conversations are designed to evolve, and that's the most interesting thing. But it's really interesting what you said there is that, you know what, in the UK, everybody has a doctor. They all do. Everyone has a doctor. You go over the pond, you cross the Atlantic, everyone has a doctor, a therapist, and a coach. And yet, here in the UK, it's like, "Oh, I don't need a therapist because that's a sign that I'm not good enough or that I need someone, and that's not me. A coach, I don't need a coach. I can do this on my own. But the fundamental truth is that rap of doctor, coach, therapist, and fortunately for me, I've qualified and trained in all three, which is such a beautiful, privileged place to be, Nick. I can't tell you how incredible it is to be able to offer exactly what you've said because you've experienced that difference that a therapist makes to you. You've experienced the difference a coach can make, and you've utilized that now to help others as well. And I think that's so, so important is that those titles, and you can call them titles, but what sits behind that is the need that we all have for a critical friend, for a cheerleader, for an accountability partner, for someone to help with us reshape our beliefs, to give us a sense that there is a different way, a new way. And exactly as you said, there's this phenomenal potential that is just waiting to be unlocked. But there's quotes, aren't there? You know, if you always look at things the way you look at them, you'll always see them the way you see them. You've got to have a kind of shift of perspective and lens. And that's that kind of, that connection, the coach, the therapist, the doctor, all of that give you that blend. So I'm so, so glad that you've kind of gone on this journey for yourself as well. And as painful as it sounds as though it was, and, you know, thank you for sharing how hard the depression was, because I think that's important for people to hear, is that journey has got you to this place where you now are this guy on fire and are going to be helping other guys to be on fire as well. And I just love that. So amazing.
It definitely fascinates me how we are in the UK that we still have this, we still resist seeing the benefits of a coach. Yeah. So my daughter, this weekend, we did vision boarding. All three daughters were sat down and myself, and we were doing the vision board for next year. And two of them have coaches, and for different reasons, but they have coaches. And my middle girl has always been against the idea of having a coach. And the reason being is when I was going through, just before we got divorced and we were trying to sort out our marriage, we all went to family coaching, and it didn't work. So she has got this thought process that coaching doesn't work because it didn't save our family unit. And I've always tried to steer her into having a coach, but in a very gentle, sideways way, let her come to her own decision. And when we were doing the vision boarding, she wrote 4 things down, and a lot of them were around self-esteem. And it was the perfect time for me to go, this is brilliant, because you can put all the 4 of these together and package it as a coach, because these things can be worked on for you. And my oldest daughter was there, and she said, you need to speak to my coach. She's amazing. She's helped me with this, helped me with that. And Sienna said, I don't want a coach. I don't want a coach. I said, but Sienna, I said, you've had coaches before. And she said, what? No, I haven't. I said, all your dance classes, all your street dance, your tap, your ballet, I said, they're all coaches. I said, you're only going to know more by getting someone who knows it to share it with you. I said, so you want these things, so you need to go to someone that's got these dance moves that can show you the tools and steps that you need to take to be able to pull off this choreography. So long story short, she's now having her first chat with the coach next week, and going to start having a coach moving forward into 2023. And I don't know why we have it, but the more we can get the message out there that we all use coaches anyway, driving instructors, job training, all those things. So actually, why not have individual coaches that can stop us feeling so bloody lousy about ourselves and actually help us get what we're trying to get out of this one life that we have.
Yeah, no, it's a powerful thing. I think the sadness is that unfortunately on social media, I mean, you'll have seen this, everybody's a coach. There's a course you can do and be a coach in 3 days. And because it's so unregulated, you really don't know what value, what benefit, what gift you're getting from the coach that you do sign up to or feel attracted to. But it's like any therapeutic relationship, whether it's between a doctor and a patient, a therapist and their client, between a coach and a coachee, it's all about the relationship, which takes us all the way full circle back to the beginning of our conversation about connection, right? And that's the important thing, is we've got to focus on connecting. So important.
No,
this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I think we could keep going, couldn't we? But we're gonna need to wrap it up somehow. So, what final words would you like to leave today?
I would just like to say, I'm a massive believer that what you're saying in that million hours, I'm a true believer that we can certainly live to well over 100, and healthily. There are so many things out there that will help us do that anyway. But even by taking control and ownership of the bits that we can do, is something that I'm a massive, massive fan on.
Last thing, quick fire, and we will wrap this up. So I'm just going to say a word, and I just want you to give me kind of the first thought that comes in your mind, okay? So first word is health. Let's go. Health.
Lifestyle.
Oh, I love that. My fave word. Well done, Nick. Success.
Family.
Oh, intriguing. And finally, happiness.
Inside job.
Oh, with all of that, I know I'm going to have to have you back on this show again, because there's stuff there that I really want to get into even more with you. So amazing. Look, thank you, Nick. You have given us some really important insights today. You've shared some of your own vulnerabilities, which is so, so important. You've told us about your work and Andrea's work as well. So really looking forward to sharing that and championing that with you guys as well. So thank you so much.
Listen, thank you for having me on, and let's keep talking, because I'm sure there's lots of things that we can support each other, but also just learn from each other. And it's been a great conversation, and thank you for including me in your podcast.
Oh, amazing. Thank you, Nick. Now that was certainly interesting, wasn't it? Connection and disconnection, feeling disconnected in a connected world. The conversation all about loneliness. I mean, we've all felt it, haven't we? Haven't you? If you're truly honest with yourself, just maybe close your eyes. Are there times when you feel lonely? I do. Running a business, I know, that can feel lonely. Entrepreneurship can definitely feel lonely. Raising a family, even if you have a full house, can feel lonely, especially at times when you might feel as though you're doing so much of it on your own, alone. Marriage, relationships, friendships, they can feel lonely. But why does this even matter? Well, look, lots of reasons, and we touched on some of those in the conversation, but here's a big one, a big one. There's a systematic review of the literature that was done by Professor Holt Lundstad and her team, of course. And this was done in 2015. And what they did was they analysed over 70 independent prospective studies. Now, what's a prospective study? Well, a prospective study is one that follows people forward over time. So in this review, what they did was they followed over 3.4 million participants through their life, and then they published their meta-analysis in the peer-reviewed journal Perspectives on Psychological Science. And here's what they found. What they found was that loneliness is linked with early death. Yes, you are 30% more likely to die early if you're lonely. Now think about that. That is the same sort of stats that are associated with obesity or smoking or inactivity. So the question is, why are we paying less attention to these social factors when it comes to health, despite evidence that obesity, smoking, inactivity, and socialization all carry an equal influence on our health and our longevity? So what are we going to do? Well, remember, on this show, we are reaching our potential to live a 1 million hour life, which means we are paying attention to our connections and to our relationships, and we are doing something about loneliness. So just click through to the next episode where I will be giving you my health hacks on lifting loneliness, and I will see you over there. Wish you a health activating day.